Hello, this is the Paddock Plus podcast, and on this episode, we're looking forward to the best Grand Prix of the year because Neil and I can actually work at a round of MotoGP and sleep in our own beds. The Grand Premio Monster Energy de Catalunya is round 6 of a season in which we've had 3 different winners and 8 different riders on the podium. It's been close, it's been unpredictable, and it's been wonderfully loose. I'm Adam Wheeler, and with me today is the world's biggest Moto3 fan and a man who has just discovered the joys of deep washing his motorcycle, David Emmett. When do you arrive in Barcelona, Dave?
On that Wednesday that they have nowadays.
Fair enough. Also joining us is the maestro of MotoGP Minutia, Neil Morrison. Will you be mixing MotoGP and the Primavera Sound Music Festival this weekend, Neil?
I will not. Is it this weekend, Ed? I haven't even looked because I just knew that I probably couldn't go to it. I did do that in the past, but that was when I was this thing called young and I had energy and I could kind of balance work and pleasure. Absolutely no chance of doing that now at the ripe old age of 37. So sadly, I'll just be sticking to the motorbike business.
One birthday, Dave, and suddenly he's lamenting the days of youth.
Usually he's gone from his mid-30s to his late 30s, and that's what happens. It's all downhill from there.
It's a seismic shift.
It is absolutely, absolutely massive.
Well, we've had to jettison Steve English for this show to make way for none other than former MotoGP racer, still a rider, mind you, of course, and due to appear at Mugello next week, Pol Espargaro, who will be joining us shortly to discuss his transition, Catalanismo in racing, and more. First up, a reminder to head to Renthal.com for the best accessories for your street bike. It's easy to click on the road section and then discover clip-ons, handlebars, grips, chain wheels, chains, brake pads, and more. Renthal is a leading name in the industry for a very good reason. Check out Renthal.com. Let's get straight into the Catalan GP. I always tend to recommend it, guys, to people who ask, which round of MotoGP should I visit? Barcelona is 20-25 minutes away. It's a blast on the motorway, so relatively easy. It's an interesting track in a fairly sort of compact facility. And the weather's usually pretty good. I don't know sort of what more you could ask for.
I mean, it's always quite sweaty. That's the one thing about the Barcelona race, because it's I don't know. It's not even a bowl because it's sort of a little way up the hill from the town of Montmeló, but it just seems to be the paddock seems to be the hottest place on earth. Because it sort of traps all of the heat, and it's always sort of quite humid as well. Sort of the sea or the humidity rolls in from the sea, and that really makes it quite sweaty. But it's a fantastic place. This for me is also one of the things people say. Well, which race should I go to? And it it depends on. Are you just coming for a race, or are you also coming, you're bringing your family? Do you want to do a few other things? Barcelona is fantastic for that. Mugello the same, because, Mugello, you get to visit Florence, you can go to Bologna. The Barcelona race, there's Barcelona, there's the coast, the beaches, the Mediterranean, and some fantastic places in at the back of the country, further inland in Catalonia. So yeah, and it's a good track. It's an interesting track. It doesn't always produce great racing, but it's still, I really do like the layout.
Yeah, I think it's one of those places where, like you said, David, maybe it doesn't always produce the closest racing. It's not quite a Mugello or a Phillip Island, but there's so much interesting stuff that happens there. I mean, I was looking back through the kind of history books before we came on air, and I was just thinking, there has been some genuinely quite weird, dramatic things that happen. I mean, aside from the shenanigans at the first corner on the first lap that we've had for many years, you think back to, when was it, 1998, Biaggi getting black flagged after he didn't take a ride through penalty for overtaking under a yellow flag at a really pivotal point of the championship. You think of 2001 with Rossi and Biaggi squaring up to each other after the race, Rossi actually landing a blow on Biaggi's mouche, which I think was to the joy of the vast majority of motorcycle fans around the world. And even as recently as 2021, we had Fabio Quartararo, who was fighting for the championship in his championship year, fighting for the victory with Miguel Oliveira, and then doing something which I don't think we've ever really seen before on unzipping his leathers and chucking his chest protector out coming through turn 3, 4, turn 3, I think it was. So yeah, there's always kind of some sort of drama. Aleix Espargaro obviously getting his lap count wrong 2 years ago. So yeah, there is an element of randomness and strangeness that comes at this round.
Neil, I love how you say, you went to the history books, which probably means you just looked out of a window and scoured through your memory banks. It's guys, do we have, before we sort of get into some of the weirdness, because I think it's a great point, do we have like the general view that the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya is good for racing? Because the grip is notorious, right?
Yeah, the grip is terrible, even though it was resurfaced in 2018. I had to look it up because I remember them complaining about the grip. And then I thought, hang on, wasn't it resurfaced recently? And it was, and it's still terrible. The way that it was resurfaced, it didn't really improve the grip. Again, I think the track takes a fair old beating because it's, it does get hot. It gets a lot of use. It's one of the most heavily used tracks in the world. Bike launches, track days, racing of every single possible conceivable, form. F1, truck racing, car racing, bike racing, Spanish Championship, CEV, Catalan Championship. Yep. Oh yeah. Catalan Championship, the whole nine of World Superbikes, everyone and everything goes there. It gets tested out a bit as well. So the track takes a real beating. And I mean, in terms of the layout, you should have fantastic racing because there's some great parts of the layout. That final section is superb, and we've seen some outstanding passes around there. Rossi versus Lorenzo, and then obviously top rack on Bautista. Yeah, they're just this year. So yeah, it's. There should be great racing, but somehow it also allows the track to get a bit spread out.
I can testify as to the use of the Circuit de Catalunya, Barcelona-Catalunya. My wife has done a run around it, and I've driven a Lamborghini around it for a birthday present. And it was actually on the old layout, where they had that awkward chicane. Sadly, in sort of the aftermath of the Luis Salam accident, I can't remember the name. Is it turn 12? I can't remember.
Yeah, they renumbered it, and they also renumber it anyway for F1 because it's a slightly different layout. So yeah, I think it's like 12, 13, 14. Hang on, no, 13 and 14. I think it's like 11, 12 or something that they put in there.
I had an experience driving this car, and the guy next to me was more of a motivator than a guide. He would say, "Foot to the floor now and accelerate hard." And you're just coming out of this turn thinking, right, okay, goodness, I'm going to slide off the track here, because the track does weave. I mean, there's quite a nice balanced mix of corners, both sharp, acute, as well as open and quick. And it was a good experience for sure. The kids were on the pit wall and they said, the car backfired. Well, not backfired, but as you clicked up a gear, it made a popping sound. And that was the most exciting part of the day for them. So, but yeah, like you say, Dave, it's used a lot. And I think it has been pretty much since, it was created in the early 1990s. And it's currently at the center of not like a furore, but basically a lot of fuss in Formula One, because Formula One, I think Madrid have made a bid, or they have a contract or some sort of situation where they're going to take the sport to the Spanish capital. And Barcelona, / Jerez have been the main sort of home for Formula One in Spain over the years. So it's always been a bit tricky. And the Catalan government, of course, fund this Grand Prix as they do Formula One. And, the recent World Superbike transition, because it was always amusing that the factory Kawasaki team were based a stone's throw from the Circuit de Catalunya. And then, they've actually had a home Grand Prix for the last couple of years. So there's a lot of activity.
There's a lot of activity and there's a lot of drama as well. I mentioned about weird stuff happening. That's kind of before we talk about some of the drama that we've had at the first turn. And it is one of the kind of most dramatic first couple of corners, I think, on the calendar that we have, just because of the nature, because they're approaching at such high speed from such a long straight. The start-finish line where they start from is quite a distance from turn one. And we've had, pile-ups there in, several years gone by. I mean, you think back to 1999, Alex Crivier was fighting for the championship and was taken out there. Then we had the Melandri and Gibernau Caparossi crash in 06. We had Enea taking a couple of people down last year. And then Pecco crashing out dramatically coming out of turn 2, and even Taka taking down Pecco and Alex Rins in 2022. So it is one of those places where everyone's trying something at the first chicane, and that usually can be a bit of a lottery. Even Lorenzo taking, I think, 3 other guys down at what was it, turn 10 at the end of the back straight. Maybe that was on lap 2 in the 19 race. I think it was Rossi, Dovi, and Maverick. So it's one of those tracks where sometimes there's quite spread out racing, and sometimes the racing can be spread out because there are these incidents on the first lap which sort of skittle 3 guys in the leading pack, and then a guy out front suddenly finds himself in a world of space. So it's definitely one to keep your eye on in the first 2 or 3 laps.
Dave, we've had wins by Aprilia, Yamaha and KTM in the last 3 years. Curiously, no Ducati success since Jorge Lorenzo in 2018. So that makes it quite an outlier, really, on the MotoGP calendar at the moment. It's not really like a Ducati stronghold, you could say.
No, but I mean, on the other hand, you could also say that Pecco Bagnaia taking himself out from the lead on that first lap last year was a sign that he could have been doing better. He was in with a chance of victory there. It does seem that the problem has always been that it's a very low grip track, and the Ducatis struggled with that a little bit. Obviously, Dovizioso with the old Michelin tyre, the old Michelin tyre, Andrea Dovizioso was absolutely superb at tyre management, and that was how he always managed to do so well. And it is also a track where you have to be patient. The race is decided at the end in the last 5 laps, not in the first sort of 2 or 3 laps. So, maybe that. I mean, it's hard to see anyone other than a Ducati winning this year, but we had an Aprilia 1-2 last year. There's every reason that we could see an Aprilia 1-2 this year as well.
Yeah, I think that's it's, you would probably have to say Aleix and Maverick could be favourites going into this weekend just because of the dominance there last year. I know Pecco had his moment at turn 1, Dave, but even in the sprint when he was made the distance, he was still beaten soundly by Aleix in the end. I know he did a fantastic job in the sprint last year, Pecco, but he was still beaten at the end of the day. And Aleix and Maverick are kind of of the opinion that, that this year's Aprilia is better than last year's. Maverick has definitely taken a big step forward, I think, in his riding this year. I think he's the strongest Maverick we've seen in MotoGP. I think he might be. I know it's always so dangerous going into a race saying that Maverick could be the favourite, but historically, this has been so good for Aprilia. 1-2 last year, as Dave said. Aleix won the sprint. Aleix was on for second place in 22 before his last lap miscount. So, Aprilia has 3 or 4 tracks on the calendar where it is absolutely superb. It is the best bike, and the kind of the rolling nature of the corners here, where they can go into these sort of long curves, let off the brake with a lot of speed. That really seems to suit kind of Aleix's riding style. So yeah, I think both of the Aprilias will be certainly looking at a podium finish here, at least.
Yeah, I mean, Maverick Vinales goes into a lot of weekends as the favourites to both win and also finish with nul point. So let's see how we can go. But I mean, yeah, as you say, it's a proper corner speed track. It's a track we can use a lot of corner speed, and the Aprilias. The one thing they've done really well is that ground effect fairing has helped them really carry a lot more, even more speed. They can enter the corner fast and then carry that speed through the corner, and that, I think, is one of the reasons why they are so strong, and one of the reasons why I think that they start as favourite.
It's did we ever get to the bottom of the Bagnaia incident? What caused the crash? There was some sort of hint that it was an electronic thing. It wasn't very clear in the aftermath exactly what went wrong for that one.
I mean, rider error is what went wrong. He was, pushing too hard, trying to get away. He was trying to escape. He knew he had to win, and he wanted to win by getting away as quickly as possible. And he just went in too fast, gave it a little bit. The tires were cold as well. I think they were rolling around because it's a long warm-up lap, and you sit on the grid for a little while, and because it's right and then left, and the left side of the tire, it's really easy for it to cool down. So there's sort of a lot of factors that go into it, but I think in the end it was just getting on the gas a little bit too eagerly, a little bit too early, on a tyre which was a little bit colder than would have been ideal.
We're eating a little bit into sort of our predictions section of the show, which will come later on. But there's a couple of riders that have more than one success in Catalunya. Marquez and Fabio Quartararo. Quartararo winning in 2 classes. Mark winning in 2019, of course, with the Honda. And after recent performances, Neil, you'd have to say that Mark is looking pretty good for his home GP, right? I mean, it would be a very timely victory.
It would be, yeah. I mean, he's been as close as you can really get in the last 2 Grand Prix that we've had. He's been knocking on the door. He's had fantastic comeback rides in both of those GPs. He was on pole in Jerez, but obviously was a little tentative at the start of the race because he had crashed in the sprint, and he was a little nervous early on. He then got stuck behind, I think it was Marco Bezzecchi, and had to make up quite a bit of ground on Bagnaia from there. And then obviously he was 13th on the grid in Le Mans. So I think if Mark can sort of have a relatively drama-free sprint, qualify on the first 2 rows of the grid, then he's definitely going to be a factor here. He's only won, twice is it ad that you said? I think it was 2018, 2019, 2014 as well, maybe?
2014.
2014, sorry, and 2019. But he's more often than not, I think, been on the podium in Barcelona. He's maybe not been a complete winning hound there, but he's had a very good podium record. So, for sure he will be in the mix, as I think Pecco and Jorge Martin will be, because Martin's been, I think, second the last 2 years that we've gone to Barcelona, and and Pecco, as we were saying, was in the run for the victory last year before he binned it on the first lap. So, I think the trio that we saw fighting at the front in Le Mans will definitely be there amongst the Aprilias.
Dave, what about Maverick Vinales? Because it's, as we talked about before. Actually, let's skip Maverick. We won't talk about him so much. What about Fabio Quartararo? Because he has won, like we said, twice on the Yamaha. Things are getting slightly better for the Frenchman, but the chances of him making a hat-trick again, as we've seen this season, are going to be an uphill task, to put it lightly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Yamaha are still in a hole. Honda are still in a hole. They've both been at Mugello, was it this week or last week, I think, on Wednesday. They had a test there for a couple of days. So they will have been able to work through a few things, but they've still got a long way to go. They are improving, they're moving forward, but they're still not ready to be competitive. The thing where Quartararo is going to struggle, where the Yamaha is going to struggle, it needs to carry a lot of speed. It needs to be sort of predictable, and the bike is just too aggressive at the moment. It is too twitchy. So the problem is that what Quartararo can't really do is use all of his advantages, and the advantages which he used to have of getting good drive out of corners, being able to carry the speed and carry that speed onto the exit. The bike just isn't reacting in the right way for them to be able to do that. So unless they have a new engine, we've been talking about the fact that they do have a new engine that they've been looking at bringing this year. If that is a step forward, if that does the right thing, then maybe the Yamaha can be a little bit more competitive. And as far as Honda's concerned, I think they are still, there's a massive backlog of work, and they need to keep they just keep to need they just need to keep grinding away until they actually get something sorted.
There he is. It's great to be joined by Pol Espargaro. Hey, Paul, how you doing? Bon dia.
Hey guys, bon dia.
Looking forward to the home GP in a slightly different way this week.
Yeah. Now I'm starting to enjoy the GPs. Before it was everything in tension and super stressful, especially the home GP. It was one of the worst one of the year. But now I'm just looking a little bit more than what is just the GP, the people on the stands, and I'm enjoying it so much in a different way.
Paul, just I guess I would love to ask you, how are you finding this year? Because you've obviously been a mainstay in MotoGP for so many years after your championship in Moto2. And I guess it's a different change of pace for you a little bit. You're doing some TV work for DAZN. You're also obviously doing some testing work and some other work for KTM. But it must be quite strange coming to the races and not having that crazy pressure on your shoulders. How is it for you?
Yeah, it's weird. It's super strange. So sometimes I feel still like I'm gonna go on the bike, like especially on the time attacking qualifying or before the race on the grid. I'm doing the zone, and sometimes I need to make an interviews to a rider, and my hands are sweating. Still the feelings of racing and nerves and tension still are there, but obviously my life have slowed down a lot, not just on racing side, also in my private life. Before I was used to be all the time training, morning and afternoon, and I had not so much time for let's say my family, for sure weekends off, but normally we don't have many weekends off when we are racing. And then when I was back home, I was still training and thinking about what's gonna come, how I'm gonna perform, especially this time of the year where everyone is talking about new teams or these kind of things. I was not able to sleep so much, and then it was stressful during the day. So everything have calmed down much more, and I'm enjoying life in a different way. Being a MotoGP rider is so nice. Don't misunderstand me. It's amazing, but also to calm down your life and do normal things. It's also nice.
That tension, Paul, because I remember seeing you at for the first time again at the Sepang test, and you look so much more relaxed. You look like a weight had fallen from your shoulders. But when you're doing that, when you're doing interviews on the grid and stuff, you know what it's like on the grid. Because I remember interviewing people on the grid, and you felt like you were interrupting them. You were disrupting their pace. Do you feel a sense, almost like a sense of guilt at like saying, "Look, I'm sorry, but I've got to ask this for you," or do you know how does it work? How does that work?
Yeah, you are super right, because the first time I needed to interview a guy was in Portimao, and when I was about to do it, I was live, and Izaskun told me, "Paul, you are not just focused. I mean, we are here just live. We are here, but you look super nervous." And I said, "Yeah, I'm so sorry, but I cannot be one of you guys at this moment. I'm just suffering a lot, and I feel I'm in the middle of the time." You realize how much people there is on the grids now. I didn't realize before, because I was sitting on the bike and always checking the first corner and thinking what's next, which map I'm gonna need to put in case of I'm fighting with this guy or this guy, or and now I can feel the environment. For example, in Le Mans, the last GP, I was stuck when the people were singing the Marseillaise, the theme, the hymn of the country. I mean, this is every year, but it was the first time I actually noticed this. These kind of things where it's weird, it's super weird, but it's so new for me, like going out of the circuit and see so many people there sleeping with their vans and making noise with the bikes. Yeah, it's amazing, and it's the first time I'm living it. But yeah, it's super weird.
Paul, obviously you had a horrific crash at the start of last year in Portimao, and then you came back midway through the season. I remember you telling us when you came back that your body was needing a bit of a break physically because it had obviously been through so much and such a fast recovery as well. How has that been? How are you feeling physically now? Like, do you feel that kind of without the kind of intense nature of racing, you've been able to recover in that regard as well?
Yeah, there is one thing that it's a silly thing, but it reminds me how bad I was, and I didn't realize it. There is a humidifier in my daughter's room, which I put the water on, and it's like about, let's say, 2 liters water, 3 liters water, and it's a little bit high. So every time I was putting water when I was injured, I couldn't lift it with my 2 hands. Like I couldn't lift it 2 kilos, 3 kilos to put it on the top to start the humidifier. And now I'm doing it with 1 hand, even with 1 finger. So then I realized, because this is a normal life silly thing, but then I realized that in that conditions, I was jumping on the bike. I was not able to lift 3 kilos up. Imagine with my left hand, imagine how I should be riding the bike. I was so broken, so underperforming in physical conditions that, for example, like going into the qualifying in the last lap, the last corner, going super fast. For example, in Thailand, I was about to go to the Q2 easy. And then suddenly I did a huge mistake in the last corner. I went super wide because I didn't brake. I was not able to hold the bike. And then in that moment, I didn't realize it was because that. And then I was complaining about engine brake, or the bike was shaking a lot. But now I'm thinking about this moment, that time of the year, and I realized I was not okay. I mean, and going wide, stupid crashes. I couldn't handle some overtaking. End of racing really weak. End of races, and then I realized how bad I was and how good I am now.
That's a really interesting point, Paul, because when you're racing, there is just nothing in your mind but racing, just racing. And you don't really get a chance to step back and look at what's going on. You're always looking for like an immediate championship. Is there any, looking back, is there any point where you sort of think, I would do that differently now? If I could have just taken like 2-3 breaths to think about something, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Yeah, okay. So now I understand how bad I was. Like I put in Instagram, the first video I put after the crash, I was seated and I was talking. And then I checked the video because I didn't want that the people sees me super bad. So I wait so much till they open my mouth, because I broke my jaw for a couple of places. So I had the mouth fully closed for 1 month. So when I could start to talk after 1 month and a half after the crash, I put a video on Instagram, and then I was checking the video and said, bah, it's not bad at all. I look okay. It's fine. And then now I checked that video and said, man, you were destroyed. How you were able to put that video on Instagram? Why did you put that video? Because in that moment I was so bad that in that moment I felt very good, So this is exactly what happened when I was racing. I thought I was okay, but I didn't. I was not okay. I was very bad. But now understanding how was my physical conditions in that moment, knowing how I am now, maybe I would took the things a little bit easier, not push myself so much, like on result wise, or just just trying to make it happen where I was not ready, and I was pushing myself so much when my body was not okay, was not ready to make it. So still I was pushing like I would be 100%. So I would take a little bit easier at least the first races of the year, and not pushing myself as much as I was doing in the past when I was okay, because at that moment I was not.
Pol, your career is still going, but I mean, it was 10 years as a MotoGP racer, and I think another 7 in the World Championship, of course, the World Championship in Moto2. And if we talk about the Catalan Grand Prix, which is what we're doing on this podcast, then you won there in Moto2. I think you got another podium, right, in 125. Maybe it was only the second or third of your career. I mean, I remember watching Grand Prix racing at that time thinking, who is this teenager? Who is this kind of exciting kid who's just, putting the bike in strange places and doing really exciting stuff? But I think what we really like to know, and some of our listeners as well, is what is it actually like to race at the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya? Is it a track where you think, this is really cool, it's very exciting, or is it kind of frustrating in a way? I mean, I know you were born next door, so maybe you have a special connection to it, but do you also look at it and think, oh man, I hate that place, or I like it? What's it like?
Yeah, it's weird because we have the two sides of a coin. Like one side is that it's the home GP, which is nice because I was sleeping at home, so I was going to the GP with my car or with a motorcycle in the morning. I was waking up, saying bye bye to my family, and then going there on racing. This was crazy, and also normally it was on 10th of June. It was sometimes that I was celebrating my birthday on the podium because the race was on 10th of June and it wasn't my birthday. Maybe during the weekend or just in Sunday. It happened like 3 or 4 times in my career. So it was a match of racing at home, my birthday, and also I was performing pretty well there. So it was an unbelievable feeling. But in the other side of the coin, everyone is asking you for a passes, in the last time. Compromises that you are normally people that you know and you are friends. And then in the last time on Tuesday, they are calling you, hey, you have a pass? I just saw it's Catalan GP here on the corner and I want to go. I said, man, it's just 3 days to start the weekend and you are asking me for a passes. And then somehow you need to manage these things, which it sounds stupid. But at the end of the day, if you put things on the top of other ones, plus the pressure of racing and you want to perform and blah, 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 then it becomes a super stressful weekend. But it's also always super nice. Also, the weather is always good. And it's a nice place to ride. Barcelona is a very, very cool place to ride.
Yeah, it definitely is, Paul. We were just talking before you joined the call about how many strange things that have happened at the Circuit of Barcelona-Catalunya. You think of the crashes at the first corner. It happened last year. It happened in 2022. It happened many years in the past as well, 06 and 1998 as well. I mean, is there kind of a reason, do you think, for this? Obviously, the track is a very low grip track and there's some very heavy braking corners after long straights. But how come we tend to see some dramatic incidents and quite strange incidents as well at this track?
Yeah, so we need to know that in Barcelona, there is activity every day of the year. I think there is 2 days, 3 days on the year where the track have nobody riding on it. So this is amazing. There is a lot of activity there. So it means that the track, it's difficult to be grippy with this high amount of activities there. So every year we found the track with less grip. Also, in the past, they were doing the preseason, the Formula One preseason there, which normally the Formula One with the downforce they have when they brake, it's like they make the track like clash each other, and then they make like these small bumps, small waves on the brake. So it's an understanding that the track it's difficult because the grip. But then also we have a first corner which it's very tricky because it's a change direction. So what means that to prepare the second corner before the Curbone, you need to anticipate the first one. So you need to be a little bit slower on the first one, then change direction and go to the second one. That means that the first corner is pretty slow, and then you need to make the change direction in the middle of the corner. So normally when the riders are so close to each other and you are making a change direction, it's so easy to have a clash with another rider, and then it makes a big problem. So I understand Barcelona, Circuit of Barcelona-Catalunya is one of the best ones of the year. We need to remember that it's super old racetrack, and still it's one of the best of the calendar in safety-wise or in, the pit boxes, and they are renewing it every year. So it's super nice place to ride, but it's true that also it's a very fast place, which when the speed is high, things happen, and things happen badly and very fast. So let's see. I hope this year nothing happened, especially in the first corner. Last year was quite dramatic. So let's see if we can enjoy a good one.
I remember something from 2012, the Moto2 race, where Mark, was it 3 or 4 laps to the end, came up the inside and knocked you off. And then I went to the Moto2 press conference and Emilio Alzamora called me a bad journalist for asking about Mark's vision problems. So, that track, it seems like there are so many like really good, because that La Caixa, it's a fantastic corner. The other long corners, the long corners down the hill, sort of, what is it, 13 and 14 now, the last two corners. There are so many fantastic corners on it that's what make it really, really an exciting place to race.
I agree, David. I mean, we have seen an amazing end of races. A good point is that the track is pretty wide. So when it's wide, there is different lines able to do. And also, it's not these kind of places where after a corner or one or two corners on the last lap, you cannot overtake. It's opposite there. You can overtake even in the last corner. We have seen Valentino and Jorge fighting in the very last corner. That was crazy, and it happened a couple of times even in other categories. So even on the last corner, if your acceleration is good in the slow categories, you can even overtake before the cross-check flag. So I mean, it's a place where there is a lot of possibilities of overtaking, braking in La Caixa, as you said. But then in the last two fast corners, especially when the tire is dropping or the bike is moving, it's difficult to put the bike inside and keep the good line. So it's super nice. I think now MotoGP, as we are seeing it with high level of competition and a lot of young and talented riders, and also the championship is pretty close to one rider to another one. We're going to enjoy it so much this weekend.
Paul, as you've now come over to the dark side and joined the bad journalists a little bit in terms of your day job, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the story currently in MotoGP. I mean, do you think Marc Marquez winning for the first time on Ducati, maybe it is home GP, is maybe a bigger story than, say, Pedro Acosta about to win his first race, or, the resurrection of Maverick? I mean, for you, what's kind of going to be the most interesting thing to see coming into this weekend?
So first of all, I'm not a journalist. I would love to be a journalist in the moment where I am to understand how to do the interviews and things, because now I'm understanding how hard is your job, guys. Honestly speaking, it's a hard and tough job. So, I mean, this weekend, I think it's going to be, for me, super interesting to see how Aprilias are, because we have seen the Aprilias starting so-so, especially with Aleix having quite a lot of problems, and Maverick going super fast, and now in the last races dropping a little and struggling a little. But we arrived to Barcelona, where last year Aleix won the race. I think, all the weekend he has been very fast and very quick. So Maverick is in a very high level, and also Aleix wants to, is in a critical moment of his career where he needs to decide how his future is going to be. So this weekend for Aprilia, it's a very important one. I think they are going to take very, very seriously. And then in the other hand, we have the how to say it, Game of Thrones, in MotoGP, where there is three guys trying to get one factory by one Ducati. I think it's most of the people sees that as a problem. Three guys as with this high of talent trying to get this factory Ducati, but I see as all the manufacturers would love to be in that position, because they have the opportunity to have three amazing riders in one bike. If not, I think they have the big chance to keep two of them inside the factory if somehow they manage the situation in the best way. And in talking about Pedro Costa, it's also an important place. Barcelona has been not an amazing place for KTM, especially even if Miguel Oliveira have won here and they have a good results here. But normally KTM works very good with a high level of grip. Here normally is the opposite. So let's see if Pedro can get this extra, which is doing laterally in the last races, and can show some good performance at home. I think he's looking for.
Paul, we've seen a whole load of rumours in the last couple of weeks, as always, when there's a lot of drama about silly season and who's going to ride which bike next year. If someone like Jorge Martin or Marc becomes available, do you think KTM would be silly not to consider the possibility of signing them, or how do you see that?
I mean, I hear a lot of talking about it inside the paddock and talking about KTM. As I understand, they have an amazing, at the moment, okay, Augusto is struggling a little bit, but they have two strong teams with two strong, very strong riders at the moment, which is Brad Binder and Pedro Costa. Jack is struggling a little bit more as well, Augusto. But on the future, for me, I mean, there is no option for Brad. Brad is signed. We have seen many things going on in the championship, but I think both parties are happy with it. And then KTM have Pedro Costa, which I don't see Pedro moving nowhere. Not because he cannot, is because I think there is no better option to continue this beautiful story with KTM. So I don't know if it's going to be on the place of Jack, if Jack is going to renew or is going to keep in gas. But the only possibility there is for another rider to go in the peer mobility group is or having a new manufacturer inside, which it means to have two more bikes in property of the peer mobility group, which I don't think is going to happen. I have no idea. You should ask to Peter or Pete Bader, or take one out from gas and then putting another rider. So there is not many options inside the peer mobility group, but I believe that there is not in a moment where KTM, for example, is in a rush to get a rider. They have Brad Binder, which is still young. It's super fast with experience. It's a dream rider that all the manufacturers should have in their teams, in their factory teams. They have good information. It's a polite and nice, humble guy. He worked hard. He helped the team. It's a team builder. And also they have the young talent coming up as Pedro Costa. So there is not much to ask about the KTM factory racing team.
Pol, that leads to an interesting question, because you've been in both factory KTM and you've been in Tech 3. You've been a satellite rider, you've been a factory rider, because obviously you were with Repsol Honda as well. You were with Tech 3 as when they were a Yamaha satellite team. Mm-hmm. We're seeing all these rumors, like, should Pedro stay with Tech 3? Should he go to the factory team? Jorge Martin wants to go to factory team, but he seems to be doing, maybe winning a championship in Pramac. Mark has been in a factory team all of his career, and now he's in a satellite team, and he seems so much more relaxed. What's the difference between... first of all, what's the difference between being in a factory team and being in a satellite team, and especially Tech 3 versus KTM? And then if you were Mark, would you stay with Gresini if you could get a GP25?
I mean, first of all, I have lived like a change of manners in the MotoGP in the past years. So big. When I was in Tectra, for example, in Yamaha, that was a proper satellite team. We had less engine. We didn't have, for example, the seamless when it came to this fast gearbox. We were with less tools than the factory guys, much less tools. So big difference in between our bikes. So we had there Jorge and Valentino in the factory team, and then I was on Tektron satellite with a lot of less stuff. And then you ask yourself how a rookie guy can beat one guy that calls Valentino Rossi or Jorge Lorenzo with less stuff on the bike, so with a worse bike. So I think slowly the manufacturers understand that this is not possible. So a rookie guy with less stuff on the bike, with a less performing bike, cannot beat the factory guys. So if you want to have a guy in your manufacturer that you want him to build up and to go to the factory team, you need to give him the tools, the proper tools to improve. So through the years, all the manufacturers have understood it, starting from Ducati and the European manufacturers, and then let's say the Japanese adapt a little bit. Still, they are far from this mentality, but now the satellite riders have as much the same material than the factory ones. So this is super important for the satellite to perform. If this doesn't happen, it's impossible to perform as the factory guys. So even sometimes the factory guys, they are testing new things, new stuff, and then the satellite ones, they don't, and they have more freedom to play with the stuff they have that they know, and it's sometimes even easier. So answering your question about Mark, everyone wants to go to factory. This is true. the colors at the end makes a big difference. And also it's true that the people is working in a satellite and in a factory, it's the amount of people are not the same. In the factory, there is also more engineers, which, they adjust in the last parameter of electronic, which it give you this half a 10 that make you go through the Q2. These small things makes big difference in MotoGP. So that's why everyone wants to go to the factory manufacturers. In the case of Mark, if they give to him the 2025 and seeing how he's performing, for sure it would not be a problem for him to stay in Brazil. But talking about marketing side, commercial side, to be in the factory team, to wear that red colors for everyone, it's super important. Not just for just talking about results. At the end, it's not everything about results. It's about image, how your image is on the press, and how beautiful you look like on the pictures, and how your image is selling to the world. So that's why it's so important to be in the factory team, because the publicity you get, it's 1,000 times bigger than a satellite one.
Paul, just finally, I guess I have to ask you about KTM's performance this year. Obviously, you've been testing the bike. You're going to make a wild card in 2 weeks' time in Mugello. We've seen some amazing things from Pedro so far this year. Brad had a great start, but maybe has struggled in the last couple of rounds. It seems like there's 1 or 2 issues adapting the bike to Michelin's tires this year. I mean, how do you see KTM's performance, and do you still see them as potential challengers for the championship this year?
Well, I hope so. And also, Pedro is not far away. For sure, we need to find something else, because at the moment we are not as good as Ducati, close to Aprilia, but sometimes Aprilia, they have these shining moments where even Ducati struggles to follow them. So we didn't have these shining moments at the moment. Looking the results, we are much better than last year. So looking the results, the races are 1,000 times faster. The records we are beating the records in an amazing way. Like, for example, in Le Mans, I was trying to help Augusto with checking his data, and he didn't qualify to the Q2. I said, it's weird because Augusto was very fast here in Le Mans, but he ride like 4 tenths faster in the qualifying than the previous year. So, and even like that, he was not able to qualify to Q2. I mean, the bike is much faster than last year, but everyone gets much faster. And we see this tendency with the Japanese one. The Japanese motorcycles are not going worse. They are not worse than last year. Just they are not improving as much. So we see how much the other manufacturers are improving their bikes, looking the Japanese ones, where it seems that they are doing wrong, and every year they are slower. But no, actually, every year they are a little bit faster, but just a little bit, not as much as other manufacturers. So talking about KTM, the manufacturer is going better and better, but still it's not enough. So we are keep working, and we have some, let's say for the next year, some good ideas to improve the bike this year, but still, it's true. We are a little bit too far, and the talented of our riders is so big, and we need to perform to give them what they need.
Well, Paul, the bad news is that the week after Catalunya, you're going to have to be answering more of our questions when you race in Mugello. Did you look at the fastest track on the calendar and thought, okay, I'll race that one?
You're going to be the enemy again.
Listen, we know it's a holiday day in Catalunya, so you've got to get back to the girls. Thank you ever so much for your time. We're not going to let you escape, though, without giving us your prediction for this weekend. You're not allowed to say your brother. So if Aleix is suddenly not racing, who's your tip for victory?
Maverick Viñales. I think it's going to be winning the race, if not Aleix, because you didn't let me choose my brother. But in that case, both Aprilias have a huge chance of being first and second. They are very good on low grip races. And this year, I think here in Barcelona, they are going to be super fast. And then for sure, Enea can be very fast here in Barcelona. But Jorge Martin and Marc Marquez, they are in this Game of Thrones fight, which is going to be super interesting how they can perform. And every race now counts and matters a lot. So it's going to be super interesting.
So I see you've taken the David Emick tactic of tipping 4 or 5 riders instead of just
everything.
one. Spread the bet.
I said the previous. I will put my money on the previous.
All
and
right,
Pedro,
Paul,
for sure. And Brad.
Listen, thank you ever so much for your time. It's been fantastic to talk to you on the podcast, and we'll see you at the circuit in a couple of days' time.
Thank you. See you there. Thank you, guys.
Thanks to Pol, and it's an apt moment to remind you that KTM is still bringing some of the most interesting and exciting models to the market. In particular, the KTM 990 Duke is a brand new motorcycle that harnesses everything that is torquey, quick, thrilling, and utterly usable about the naked bike line from the Austrians. That reaches 30 years of existence in 2024. The 990 has 123 horsepower, a new frame, WP Apex suspension, and is the mid-class naked bike reference. It comes in orange or black, and we're hoping to get one soon to test. Guys, one more talking point that's been sort of, brought up recently, I think, as well as the silly season. Dave, your write-up in Motor Matters was fantastic. I recommend anybody's go and read it. And of course, last week's podcast as well, we delved into our listener questions and you guys tackled some big topics. But the fate of the Indian and Kazakhstan Grand Prix, they're being moved around, they're being questioned. There was a story, I think, on motorsport.com that India was in peril. It's since been countered by some sources within Indian mainstream media itself. It seems that Uttar Pradesh, the governing state that host and pay for the Grand Prix, still have to level some sort of debt for 2023 before 2024 can go ahead. So you imagine it's equivalent to being on the chopping block at the moment. But how do we feel about these Grand Prix? Are we terribly sad that they would vanish from the calendar, or should we be sort of welcoming the removal of these events if they're that unstable and threatening perhaps the credibility of the championship overall? What's your thoughts, Dave?
I mean, first of all, India deserves to be on the. India deserves a race. It's a massive market. It's a massive country. It has a massive MotoGP fans. It really is. And the race was good last week. It was a really good event. Despite really there being a lot of doubt in the lead up to it even happening, they still got a lot of fans. The problem is the Indian elections. We talked about this a little bit on the podcast last week. The Indian elections, they're not allowed to spend any money until after the elections are finished. The election is a very long process. I think 6 weeks. It finishes on June the 4th. But it looks like Dorna have an earlier deadline for payment of and settlement of fees. I'm sure it can all get sort of sorted out. The other thing, of course, is that Kazakhstan will be paying an awful lot of money, and they will want the ability to stage a race. So you can also see how Dorna will be thinking, well, we'd really like the Kazakhstan money. So yeah, that's also a possibility. I think the Indian race will happen. I still think. Pol was talking about the stress of having, or the stress he felt as a rider. The constant stress, and that is partly a result of there being between 20 and 22 races plus the sprint races. Sprint races have really stepped up the amount of pressure on the riders, on the teams, on everyone. And then add in 20 or 22 races, and it's just too many. I think you could have, I've said this before, and I'll keep on saying it, you could have 18 races and sprint races, or you could have 20, 22 rounds. You can't have both. It's just not sustainable, sort of thing. So on the one hand, I can't say that I'm sad to lose so-called, because A, I don't know what the track is like, and B, I don't really, apart from sort of taking oil money, I don't really know what we're doing there. It's just a way to sort of, fund the championship, really. I've got a very busy year this year with all sorts of other things going on. And so I welcome sort of every race they cancel almost. But that's an incredibly selfish take. But I do think that a lot of people feel the same way, that there are that taking a little bit of a stress, the relief with which each cancellation is met inside the paddock tells you a lot about the mood inside the paddock, I think.
Neil, when it comes to maybe substitute rounds? Because it looks like MotoGP is going to reach 20 rounds whatsoever. There's even talk that Portimao might come back on the calendar if it has to. Would we say that Portugal's maybe the best event in that respect, or is there another circuit? I mean, as Paul was saying about the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya, it's a venue that's used constantly throughout the year. Squeezing in a MotoGP event, can't be terribly easy for many sort of circuits or fixtures or whatever. So if we are going to go to 20 rounds, then is Portimao the best bet?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think it hosted 2 races in 2021. I think there was a race at the end of 21 that didn't go ahead, so we had a sort of an emergency run to Portimao towards the end of the year. It was the penultimate race just before Valencia, and logistically, it works in that regard. But yeah, where we would sort of tack it on to the end of the calendar would be sort of the talking point, because obviously we have a very, very busy end to this year, with a pretty long stint away, not too dissimilar from last year, not quite as intense as last year, but not overly dissimilar, with the kind of the overseas races towards the end. So yeah, if Portugal does come in, it would be interesting to know where we might have it. But yeah, it's tough to know. I know from what I'm hearing, it does seem that they're very determined to have at least one of the 2 races either in Kazakhstan or India. So I guess Portugal is a real emergency measure, but we'll know more as it develops, I guess.
I see there's currently a heat wave in Delhi of 45-degree temperatures. Nice and balmy for MotoGP racing, especially when one of the narratives, the Bud International Circuit last year when we were there, was about the heat coming off the bikes and how the riders were really struggling with that. So, yes, let's see what happens with the Indian Grand Prix. Fly Racing's Formula S helmet contains a sensor, an enabling technology that will automatically make an emergency call in the event of a crash and if you need assistance. The Formula was already one of the best off-road lids on the market thanks to the Rion and Conehead internal build and the excellent fit, comfort and ventilation. It also looks pretty damn good as well. The addition of this advanced facility makes it a pretty much essential premium level purchase, the S helmet that is. Have a look at flyracing.com for more information. Let's see if the Americans actually can translate some of that engineering to a road model in the future. Guys, just to wrap up the show, onto our predictions and Fantasy League. Actually, I'm not going to say a single word about the Fantasy League. Skip that. Let's go straight to predictions.
You're only doing that because I'm leading. Look, just because, like, for the first time in human memory, I'm actually sort of at the head of our particular group of people in fantasy. I feel cheated.
What does that say about the rest of us if he is the top?
Yeah, sad indictment, really, of what's going on, not only in the Paddock Pass podcast, but also our lives. But yes, my prediction, I'm going first. I kind of agree with Paul. I mean, the first name out of his mouth was Maverick Vinales. I'll stick my €10 note on Maverick to do the business this weekend. In terms of Fantasy League or Fantasy Team dynamics, guys, I would also maybe have a punt on Alex Marquez, because if we look in previous track records, he's one of the few riders to have won on multiple occasions in other classes, Moto 2 and Moto 3, so he clearly knows his way around the circuit. If you need someone that's maybe at a slightly lower price point, then the junior Marquez could be a wise bet. Neil, over to you first. Who's your likely figure for success this weekend?
Well, I said earlier in the show Maverick, but then Paul took that, and so did you, so I'll have to look at someone else. But I think, of the Ducati trio, there's always going to be one Ducati up there at least. So yeah, I'll go with Mark. I think I said it before, France, and he didn't disappoint. And this should be a good track for him, and a good track for his machine. So yeah, I think Mark will be up there fighting with the Aprilias.
Yeah, I think it isn't. I really get a strong sense that this is going to be an Aprilia track. Also, just in terms of fantasy, looking at the fantasy, Pol Espargaro is very cheap at the moment, and so now would be a good time to stick him in your team and then maybe sell him again afterwards. However, that's quite risky because I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Aleix. This really is going to be an absolutely key race for his future. I think, obviously, he won here last year. He could have won here in 2022 if he'd have been able to count properly. There's a lot of stuff going on. he knows that he can have a good result. He's going to be putting a lot of pressure on himself, and how he handles that pressure is going to be absolutely sort of key to his future. I think he could win, or he could have just an absolutely miserable race and have things go wrong. I think I'm gonna pick him to win just for the banter, because that's going to make sillies even more difficult, because then it's like, oh, maybe Aleix isn't going to retire, and then who do we put in the Factory Aprilia team?
All about the
Guys,
banter,
join us on
bunch.
Patreon.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, all about the banter. Exactly. It's all about, look, the only thing I'm interested in is making silly season as convoluted and ridiculously difficult as possible.
Well, you have to write about it, Dave. You don't want to be that difficult.
Oh, no, it's much more fun when it's difficult. It's really, I mean, otherwise you're just writing, Marquez is staying with Repsol Honda again, and Valentino Rossi is staying with Yamaha again. And it's just, no, this is much better.
Valentino retired, Dave. But yeah, keep up to date, will ya? Guys, join us on Patreon. If you become a Paddock Insider for $10 a month, then you get extra content, our Paddock Notes shows from Fridays and Saturdays from the circuit, the chance to chat with us at Grand Prix and the growing band through the Discord server, and the possibility to send us questions about the championship or the last race that we'll attempt to answer on our midweek show. We also have a $3 tier, which helps us get across the world to these events, and for which we open up the Paddock Pass community even more and provide the full Thursday Paddock Notes show from the tracks, where we also try to grab a colleague in for a chat. The last one with Manuel Pacino in Le Mans was a corker. Join Patreon to hear the full podcast. Dave, Neil, that's it for this week. We'll be posting our next show on Thursday from the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya.